over there. Aren't you just adapting to the situation? I love it.
Remember,
I give you my word of honor.
you can't, don't make promises you can't keep.
Good evening, everyone. The time is 6:30, and I would like to call this regular session of Chardon City Council to order. If you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Amy, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Blackley?
Here.
Chuha?
Here.
Mr. Graw?
Here.
Mr. Lelko? Mr. Martin?
Here.
Ms. Means? Here. Mr. Molesky?
Here. Agenda item number 4, approval of minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from October 13th regular session?
Under Service Committee report, third paragraph down, it says, Mrs. Chuha moved, being seconded, to include the resurfacing of Short Court as part of the state route repaving project. I think it should say something to the effect as an ad alternate.
I do remember we discussed that.
We'll decide at that time, once bids are in, whether we repave it or not.
You have that okay, Amy?
Yes.
Anything else, Dave?
That's it.
I'm sorry, did you say you're gonna need help cutting that? I think we need the torches.
Any other corrections or additions?
We have a big one, we have all the blades.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Call the question.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Lelko?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes. Thank you. Agenda item number 5, Manager's Report. Randy.
Good evening, everyone. Several things to report this evening. Start out with HR. We have had several candidates interviewed for the position of maintenance worker in the Division of Streets, Cemeteries, and Parks. A final candidate has been selected and a conditional offer made. Actually, we're going through that process right now with him, and hopefully he'll be successful, and we'll bring him on as soon as possible. The second point is just a point to let a council know that a brine pump at the service garage broke and had to be replaced, so it was ready for this winter season, 22-23. And we did not have that in the budget, but we did use funds that we had that we didn't spend that were for bidding and negotiating and post-construction and drawings for the Meadowlands Drive resurfacing project. So just to let you know that that money was reallocated to get the brine pump up and operating, at least ordered. The finance director, deputy human resource finance director, and I attended a exit conference with the state auditor's office on our last audit, which was December 31st, 2021. The audit has been released. It's up on our website, and I think all of council received a copy. Those are only good for about 30 days, I believe. If you want to go and take a look, if not, you can see it on the website. We did receive an unmodified clean audit opinion on those financial statements, which is the best opinion one can get. There were no findings and no management letters, which means that it was very good. They did have one verbal comment, which was discussed with the finance director relating to cash reconciliation, and that's been taken care of. And they also noted that the city is in compliance with the auditor's sunshine law testing. The auditor created a program called STARS for transparency, and they test the different communities on that, and we received 4 out of 4 stars, which is the highest achievement that you can get for being an open and transparent government. So I think that's notable as well. Moving on, the city offices will be closed tomorrow in observation of Veterans Day, obviously except for the 24/7 operations. And the VFW remembrance ceremony is on the square at the courthouse at 11 a.m. So 11:11 at 11, to be made to remember. Hopefully people will turn out. And I am told that Mark Cooley is here this evening on behalf of the Chardon Eagles Club. He's also the owner of Consumer Tire, and he's here to talk about a donation that the Eagles would like to give to the city. Mark, I invite you to come up to the podium.
Can I bring the rest of my?
You can bring whomever you choose. Just introduce yourselves and, tell us.
Good evening.
He's a legend.
We brought the poll.
We brought a bunch.
Good.
Growing up as a child, we didn't have a lot of money at our house, but I never went without a Christmas present. Never. Excuse me, this is hard on me. Last year, we had the opportunity to help the police department with a shop with a cop. The Jogga Eagles gave $2,000 at that time. We went down and I talked to the chief, and when you see a young child bring toilet paper and cleaning products to be wrapped for Christmas, I went to the chief and I said, this is a joke, right? He goes, no, Mark, this is what they need. They don't have nothing at their house. And I said, we are going to give more next year. So a month or so ago, I went to the office, to our meeting, and I brought it up, and I said, last year we gave $2,000. I would like to give more. Well, they graciously donated $5,000 for Shops from a Cop. This is from the Jogga Eagles. We are people helping people. Chief, if you'd like to come up, and is it all right if I present it to him as well? Kurt, you want to? This is Kurt Feigl, our president, born and raised in Chardon. Pat Kovalak is the ladies' auxiliary. George Yapko is our vice president. Kenny Arndt, Lisa Feigl's chaplain. Doug Batterson is our trustee, one of our trustees, and I'm Mark Coley, I'm the secretary. And we obviously have a couple people on the council here that are members. And this is what we do at the Jogga Eagles. We're not just people down there having fun, but we take it serious to help people in need. And this is part of it. And I thank you for letting us come up. If anybody else has anything to say, Kurt?
I think you pretty much covered it. We've got, I think there's 17 national charities that the Eagles donate to in the form of like millions of dollars a year nationally. This is one of my favorite things. It's like I was thinking about our scholarship fund too. That's money that stays here in the community, which is really what I really like to do. Giving stuff to the Max Baird Kidney Foundation and Alzheimer's and all those other things is great, but it's really nice to be able to keep it here in town. So, and in the county. So.
Do you think you guys could?
I would just like to say on that note, tomorrow is Veterans Day. We donate $500 a month to the Veterans Food Bank from our Jogga Eagles Club, our little club down there. Does a lot to help this community. So we thank you as well.
Excellent. Look official. Pat's also a state officer.
Check a little bit.
Going to be the Madam State President in a couple of years, right?
That's right.
Yeah, you bet.
I'm going to call you tomorrow and get everyone's names. Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
thank
you
you.
again.
Thank you very much.
Now, this is from Consumer Tire. We as well believe in helping our community. We give back as well. This is my wife Dee Dee, her brother Dave, and her other brother Bruce, who have been at Consumer Tire. We've been in charge for about 10 years now, and 11 years, and we appreciate your business as well. And my sister-in-law Shar, who we as well have like to donate $1,000 as well to Shop with the Cops.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
That's so
have one more for the chief, and I emailed him today, and I know he's a busy man, but this was another surprise that I found out this week. Bear with me. This is some Four Seasons Construction and Roofing, who have a business up on the hill as well. They are members of the Chardon Eagles. They have graciously donated another $1,000 for Shop with the Cops.
Wow. Very good.
This is something. And we want to just thank you very much for letting us come up this evening.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thank you to the Eagles, Chardon Tire, and Consumer Tire, and Four Seasons Roofing and Construction. Well done. We appreciate that greatly. Thank you very much.
You're welcome to stay or you're welcome to leave.
I'm walking, so.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you again. Thank you.
Very
Thank
much.
you.
That's Randy's best manager's report so far.
Best report
year.
ever. Yes, hard act to follow. Let's continue with the Public Works Project update. The Chardon Living Memorial Park Phase 2, the drawings for the Ozark 1 building, which is the restroom, the restroom building that's been ordered. They've been approved and released for production. They should be making that restroom here shortly in mid-December, beginning of January. They also have supply chain issues and backlogs and everything going on for the restroom. So we most likely won't get that until the first quarter of next year. No update on the Center Street Sidewalk Infill Project, and no update on the Hidden Glen Water Main Loop Project. The 7th Avenue Repair, Widening, and Extension Project, the field survey and base plans have been completed, and we're hopeful that the design work will get going here in the near future, and continue to move on that project to get it done. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the materials for that later on. The Maple Highlands Trail, Stream, and Wetland Restoration Project. This is the one that we're doing with the Chagrin River Watershed Partners, and the one who got the bid is Davie Resource Group. They performed an initial site assessment, ecology, and survey on the project, and had a site visit on the 27th of October, where the group walked the site and discussed the different design elements of what's going on there. There's a slight chance that they may get in and take down some trees now so that they're down while the whole bat habitat window that they can get them down. So some of those trees might be coming down. That's the end of the manager's report this evening. Any questions for me? All right, thank you very much.
I was going to ask the chief when he got back, how does he get into spending $6,000 on, all the presents and things? What's the approach for that? And does he need help with going places? And
It's going to be challenging because there's only so many officers that can shop and so many families that we can have come at the same time. I know they do reach out to the schools who then assign some families. We approach those families, see if they would like to or not, to be part of the program. And then it's allocated based on the number of family members. So it's not like every family gets X, it's based on how many children and people are living in the house. It's a good problem to have, though.
it was very heartwarming to see them come in. Okay, anything else for Randy? All right, thanks, Randy. Moving on to agenda item number 6, Planning Commission report. Andy?
Okay, thank you. Planning Commission met in regular session on October 18th. We had 2 items on the formal agenda. First was Eric Payne with Hidden Glen Associates requesting record document approval of a plat of Hidden Glen Phase 4. This is just an area of open space and a retention basin. Unfortunately, there's not any additional buildable lots, and Steve, there's no immediate plans to do a phase 5 at this point.
No, there's not.
No, unfortunately. But so that was approved. The second item on the agenda, Tom Paul with Paul Architects came on behalf of
the owners of the Chardon Tavern to request a 209-foot addition to their kitchen, and that was duly approved. And we also thanked him and the owners for the excellent job they've done on renovating Chardon Tavern. We're very grateful for their investment in that property. We had several items under informal discussion. The same architect, Tom Paul, came to us with, to discuss exterior changes ongoing at the old Rhymes Trucking site on 400 Washington Street. And I peeked in our packet that will be on the agenda Tuesday night for the Planning Commission to consider that. They're doing some upgrading, replacing some of the overhead doors, siding, and roofing on that building. So that's a welcome change to that property. The other informal discussion we have, again with Mr. Paul, same architect, with column modifications for the Mark store. That, however, didn't go so well. Their proposed drawings that he had for that, we thought were just too plain, I'll put it to you that way, not in keeping with the character of the rest of the plaza. So that was sent back for some more thinking. Steve, anything else?
Mr. Paul just today submitted revised drawings to, I believe they've matched what Planning Commission requested for those pillars, and those will be on the special meeting on the 29th.
All right. That concludes my report.
Any questions for Andy? Thank you, Andy. Moving on to council committee reports, Economic Development Committee. Kyle?
Thank you, Mayor. The Economic Development Committee met on Monday, October 24th. There are 3 agenda items. First one was to consider TIF of certain parcels. The committee reviewed the properties that the city is getting TIF money from currently and the projects the money can be used for. We reviewed the potential properties for development along Center Street corridor that could be developed in the TIF, but are also in the CRA and are currently zoned industrial. The parcels that are in the early stages of commercial development were reviewed. Second agenda item was the consider rezoning of certain parcels. Those properties, particularly those that are in the Center Street corridor, were discussed. The properties discussed currently are zoned industrial and considered if it would be more beneficial to wait to rezone them later or rezone them now. Council has the authority to change these properties from industrial to commercial. Committee members requested staff arrange a meeting with Retail Strategies to discuss the benefits of rezoning the properties from industrial to commercial. A formal recommendation to rezone the parcels and modify the CRA could be made at a future Economic Development Committee meeting if the committee wanted to proceed in doing so. Randy, did you have anything for those 2 agenda items?
You did a nice job summarizing, Councilman Martin. I think part of the meeting, I just wanted to try to elaborate more on how the TIFs and the RIDs actually work and what projects they can fund, what the pros and cons of them are, as well as the CRA and how they interplay together for parcels that are, quote, so it's kind of a layered effect of the different incentives that could take place and the effects of one versus the other, and then thinking about should we make some changes to those or make recommendations to the committee to make changes to those, then go to council if we'd like to change either the CRA or the zoning as well.
Aren't there some ramifications if we change the CRA?
Yes, there absolutely are. And what that is if you amend the CRA, and in talking with the law director, what we're proposing, or what we would propose, would be to take some parcels out, would not count as one of those amendments. You can only amend it twice before you'd be under the new rules. We have a pre-1994 CRA, and if we did amend it more than twice, then you have to come under the post-1994, which is a whole different format and rules and regulations. Oh, yes, you're right.
Has it ever been amended?
We don't. I would defer to our solicitor, but we don't think so. Really, what we did was we took out where Home Depot was, and since if we take out a parcel, it doesn't count as an amendment, then we have not actually had strike one yet.
Because I do not recall ever having a change.
Yeah, when that area was getting developed, it was purported that they were not going to take advantage of the CRA, but to be safe, the city took it out.
So retail strategies is being brought in to review that as well before we move
We wanted to
forward.
get their opinion, especially on the rezoning. What we've been looking at is that corridor, the main corridor in town, which is Center Street. That's where the most traffic is, that's the most valuable property. And that's also where we have a lot of industrial back in the day when it was zoned. Would it make sense to rezone that now to retail so that there is not that barrier to somebody coming in for development who would look at it and go, I have to go through these hoops just to get it rezoned, so I'm not going to bother with Chardon. And we don't have a formal opinion yet, right?
Correct.
Kyle, you have?
And the third agenda item was consider a hotel feasibility study. The Economic Development Team met November 7th with our partner Retail Strategies and a group called Core Distinctions Group, which are hotel consultants, which assist in hotel consulting and hotel market feasibility studies. Some of you may remember there was a hotel feasibility study done in the last decade, and it was determined that it was feasible, but that project never moved forward. These studies have a shelf life of about 2 years, so we would need to have another feasibility study done if we wanted to go that route. This meeting was more of an informational gathering meeting on the process, process and budgetary estimates. The Economic Development Committee will meet again in the future to review and make further recommendations on the study. I don't know if you have any, Heather or Randy, have anything else to add to that?
Not right now for that.
Okay, thank you. Some of the other items that were discussed were the Think Local database update. Heather, do you have an update on that?
Yes, so we have been working with the folks that we hired for developing our Think Local business directory. And I want to thank Steve Yaney for all his help on it. It's challenging to actually compile the database. It's proving to be an exercise, which last week Steve and I drove around for a couple of hours and I got really car sick because Steve was like yelling out the businesses and we were just double checking. We're like physically, we're not just like doing it online, we're actually physically have gone or driven the whole town now to make sure that everyone's being included. So I expect that that will be available to all of you hopefully before our next council meeting. We're pretty close to being done with it. And Kyle, I want to add just one thing to what you were talking about, or what we were talking about, like, even tonight, like seeing what we saw tonight with economic development, and, we talked to Retail Strategies about doing this development. In the last year, we've seen folks coming into our community and the people who bought the LTech building, which is IS Square now, the folks who just redid the car wash and now it's called the Chardon Auto Spa, and talking with them during the ribbon cutting ceremony. These, just alone with these two businesses, they've spent well over $1 million, well over, probably closer to two, between just the two of those business owners in our community. They've bought the properties, they're investing significant dollars in the properties, and they are going to be here a long time. When somebody spends that much money, they're going to be here, they're invested in the community. So when we're talking about Think Local and why that's important, and then when we see like groups in our community supporting, it's just, that's what this is all about, and that's, so that was very, if you ever have a chance to go to the ribbon cutting ceremonies and you can talk to the owners, you can really get a sense of how, they really are trying to make a go of their businesses here in our community, so.
Thank you. Speaking of Think Local, we did mention in the meeting that the Think Local and Thrive banners, which we recommended and approved as a council earlier this year, are set to be taken down real soon for the winter season. I think there's 12 of them, correct? Yeah. Throughout the city. And that concludes the Economic Development Committee meeting notes. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question, just a comment on how, that was a great summary.
Oh, thank you.
That was a tough meeting. I was at that meeting, and there was a lot to digest and then represent, so it's good. And Heather's absolutely correct about the grand openings that we've been having and ribbon cutting ceremonies, and Steve's involved with that, and many, I think we're all welcome to come to those. The last two, there's been between 30 and 40 people at these ribbon cuttings. Just great turnouts, and the enthusiasm there, and Chardon Area Chamber of Commerce, of course, is integral to all that process, so they do a great job. Melissa is a great executive of that group.
What I like seeing is the other small businesses coming to support the other businesses in their ribbon cutting ceremonies. There's at least 3 or 4 of them that I saw the last one, so it's great to see that not only the community, but these business owners come together and support each other the way they do.
Very true.
I was just going to add on that the mayor and I attended the governor's listening tour week before. And Bala Ramaya, who is the owner of IS Squared, was there, and he spoke very highly about Ohio and the government all the way down to the local level, and how he's very happy to be here, wants to expand his business here. He couldn't have been more complimentary about the process that he's gone through to get into the city in Ohio from California. So it was nice to hear.
That get-together was at Buckeye Chocolates, and they did a great job of housing a small group of people, and gave us some free candies as we left the premises. That was a benefit. It was nice. Okay, Kyle and Heather, nice work on the plan, or the Economic Development Committee. Any other questions for Kyle or Heather? Move on to Safety Committee. Heather?
Thank you, Mayor. We had our Safety Committee meeting on November 1st, Councilman Lucco and I, along with many guests. Our first agenda item was an update by Traffic Engineer Kevin Westbrook on the Systemic Safety Grant. You may recall that earlier in the year, the city had applied for the Systemic Safety Grant monies in excess of $300,000. I think it was like $360,000, 300 something around there. The money, we were looking to try to get this funding to improve the safety of the crosswalks in front of the high school and on the square. And that included changes to the crosswalks and also adding the RRFBs, which are the flashing beacons that are that people can activate, and the ones similar on the trailheads. The city was not successful in getting that grant, and Kevin offered a lot of feedback to us as to why. The main reason that Chardon didn't get the money was we were told that is because our need was not as great as other communities who had applied for the money. So the discussion that we had was about like how can we improve our chances the next time the grant comes around, which is in January of 2023. So we will reapply for that grant. And Mr. Westbrook, he had a lot of really good feedback for us on details that we can add, even pictures or video, things that we can do to try and improve our chances of winning that money. And I don't know, did you get any pictures yet from anybody?
I've not.
So if anyone is out on the square and watching people cross in the crosswalks, it would be super helpful to have those pictures. The city manager could use those pictures. Okay, that's why you were asked for that, was to help us in being more successful in the next grant.
So you want photos of people in the cross?
That is correct. If you get one with like a big semi right behind it, that would be perfect. Okay. Second agenda item was Chief Negus gave us an update on the many department equipment upgrades that are in process. These are either ordered to or to be ordered before the end of 2022. Some of these included the citywide camera project. This is the replacement and or upgrade of cameras that are around the city right now. I believe the estimated cost to do this project, Chief, $70,000 to $90,000. Is that about right? This is the replacement of existing equipment. This is not adding new cameras. This is just replacing what we have already. The system that we have right now is quite dated, and the software that we use right now is quite dated, and certainly not what I think we need at this point. Second was a grant for body cameras is in process. This grant would cover 100% of the cost to purchase 18 cameras. Each officer would have their own. and these cameras are still expected to be purchased this year. The department's OVI breathalyzer machine is also being replaced. The current unit is at the end of life. Chief, what is the cost on that?
It's about $9,000.
$9,000 for a breathalyzer. There's also a PO is in place for one new car to be purchased in 2023. The city had to get their order in now to be eligible for 2023. Okay. Chief also presented information on an upcoming emergency tabletop exercise that is tentatively scheduled right now for January. This exercise is in our emergency operations plan. We have money in the budget this year for it. And it's moderated by a third person who will give a scenario for the leaders, department heads in our, to work out, go through the process. As an example, you know, if there was a tornado that came through town and then we had an emergency situation. This tabletop exercise is the goal is, of course, to see where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are. And it is for the city staff who are going to be involved in it. So this isn't something where all of council is going to sit in on. The folks who should be involved in it will be involved. And right now that is planned for 2023. We also discussed very briefly, we had been asked during a Chardon Square Association meeting, a couple members had asked about why we don't offer Safety Town in Chardon anymore that we used to. So Chief Gaspar actually helped us with that and just said that there had been a drop off in the demand for that program, so we don't offer it anymore. I did look online. There are programs for Safety Town for pre-kindergartners in Chagrin Falls and in Burton. Last thing, Chief Gaspar also talked about the availability of free smoke and carbon monoxide detectors for people that are in need. So if somebody is somebody who is disabled, somebody who is in financial need, can contact the Chardon Fire Department and they can get a free smoke or carbon monoxide detector. Chief also had said that for folks who are unable to install them themselves, the fire department has actually helped them install them in the past. Knox boxes, which I didn't know, had never heard of those, for seniors are also available. These are lock boxes that go on the front door. So if there's an emergency situation, they put a house key in it, and if emergency services are coming to your home, they don't have to break in the door to get into your house. They can just take the key out of the box, and the fire department is the one who has the master key to all the Knox boxes. Knox block boxes. Last thing, I know. Last thing is the fire department would like to remind folks to make sure, if you didn't last weekend, that you change the batteries in your detectors that you have already. And also to make sure that you clean your chimney and do your chimney maintenance before it gets cold.
Yeah, there's been a lot of carbon monoxide issues.
Yes. Dave, do you have anything that you want to add?
Just one point on the crosswalks on Main Street. If you may recall that our proposal was to eliminate one of those crosswalks. And Kevin reported that it may be more beneficial to our grant opportunities if we keep that crosswalk. Now, we may want to move it in combination with the new courthouse project, but removing it from existence might have actually hurt us. So it's something we have to take a look at, right?
Yes.
If I recall right?
Yes. Yes. He had a lot of good feedback about this. I think our chances are going to be much better next time.
He covered that rating graph that cities similar to ours get graded by areas and
And the points, yeah, that they
there's
changed.
a point system, and so we just didn't make it high enough
Right.
on that. But we may be combining some things next time, and that's what Heather was referencing about the photos. All that data can help with increasing our chances of getting that grant money. Very good. Anything else for Heather or Dave on safety? All right, well done, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8, hearing of persons before council. We have no one on our agenda for those persons on the agenda. General public, does anyone care to speak to council? Come on up and identify yourselves once.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Keith. I just
just have two questions. One is, I was working the polls on Tuesday, and the doors in the Heritage House are not ADA compliant. Like, there isn't that button, if you're in a wheelchair, to push to open the door. You have to, like, push yourself through, and it seems odd in a new building.
It's news, I never thought of it, but also,
I don't
Somebody
know
can
the
look into that,
requirements.
or?
I would assume that the architect who designed the building knew the requirements. It is ADA accessible, it's just not that the doors are not.
Yeah, the doors aren't. So if
This,
you're-
actually, this building was not until 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So I don't think there's actually a regulation that requires
But they have to have
it.
that
Yeah,
button?
because we didn't have it even on on the municipal center here until just a couple of years ago.
I thought that was very strange, because in all the, newer buildings, they have the button you push, and like the Auburn Fire Department, they all, so. But
We can certainly look into it.
Okay. Then my second question was just curious about the having somebody review like our need for a motel. You said there was like, we would pay somebody to do this review. I would just assume that anybody who owns a motel group is going to repeat that same thing.
No.
They're-
The way that it works, they won't even, you have to have that, that's like the invitation to come in and even
Oh, okay.
consider you. They won't even look at you.
They don't
unless-
bother until-
Unless you have that.
Okay.
Which is what Kyle mentioned, that we have to have, it's a 2-year shelf life.
Right.
That's why once it's done, we have to try to move
Right.
on it. Otherwise, and if it's 2 years and, in 6 months, we have to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wondered, because there's other businesses that come to town that do their own, background work to figure that out.
I agree 100%, Elizabeth, because the first time I heard this, whenever we did it
Right.
6 years ago, I was like, what? Why would we do that for
For
them?
them, yeah.
But somehow the hotel industry, that's the way this is done for the feasibility
Okay.
studies.
I think,
Thank you.
didn't Tourism help us the last time?
They did, and Chardon Square and other groups were on board on that one.
Yeah.
all right, thank you, Elizabeth. Questions? Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Then move on to old business. Discuss the VFW banner program, and we're gonna start with Randy doing a summary that we've all received in our packet about what we discussed at last month's council meeting, and then we'll move forward with some other items.
I did include a memo in your packet. I'm not going to go line by line, because I'm sure everybody read it. In a nutshell, I was asked to contact the illuminating company to see if we could use the poles for a program like that. And they do have a policy that you have to adhere to, the Hometown Heroes banners that you can put up. It's a little complex. We have to get different things to meet the requirement. And actually, the applicant would be the VFW, because the city is going to operate only as the installer of these. So the VFW would be the person who would actually get the agreement and have the agreement with the illuminating company. Additionally, if some of the poles aren't the illuminating companies, if they're the telephone companies or another utility, they have to enter into separate agreements with them to use those poles as well, which can certainly be done. In anticipation of assisting the VFW, our street department, Leroy, went out and did a inventory of the poles here on Water Street from the top of the square down to the intersection of Cherry and Wilson Mills. And there's about 29, 30 poles between this area, which would be a nice way to begin, because we had decided it would be about 30 banners that we would go with in the beginning of this program. Some of them he had numbers on, some he doesn't. So we can submit that to the illuminating company. They send their engineers out to verify if the pole is indeed usable in their estimation. If not, then we can get a hold of the other utilities, get their forms, and continue with that process of trying to get approval to be able to go on the poles. The rest of the memo was really about costs. Worked with Paul, Leroy, and Chris on trying to get estimates on what we thought it would take to put the banners up, take them down, year 1 and year 2. The numbers are there. For year 1, basically up and down, $120 per banner, about 62 man hours. Year 2, since we intend to keep the brackets up, which would save all that time setting the brackets, making sure they're the right amount of feet off the ground, the right amount of feet from the next, in whatever it is on the pole, blah, 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 straight, et cetera, et cetera. Cut that basically in half. Paul did come up with a great idea of renting a lift rather than our guys using ladders. Ladder works a lot slower and a little dicier than if we had a lift. So that was a good idea, and that's calculated into these costs. And it's estimates. We don't know if it could take faster or longer, depending on what happens. And the last paragraph that I wrote was, due to the other seasonal obligations that we have in the spring and the fall, I would recommend limiting the number of banners to be installed and removed for the first 2 years to 30, so that we can then get a better idea on what it actually does take to put them up, take them down. And then the impact of the time factor on the guys and the commitment, and then also the costs. And after that, we can go, okay, here's where we are with the program. It's the time commitment that's one of the concerns, is if we're out there for, what did I say, 62 man-hours, we're not picking up leaves, we're not patching the roads, we're not doing something. It's not like we have our guys sitting around doing nothing and all of a sudden, oh, well, great, we have 62 hours we need to fill. So that just needs to be taken into consideration. Any questions on my memo or more detail needed?
You say those 30, close to 30, it's from the top of the square down to Wilson Mills on Water
Correct. On Water Street.
Street, not around the square?
Not around the square. Starting here at basically the theater, going out of town, towards the VFW.
And that the timing would be May through the end of summer, not through the end of November or
Correct.
after
Veterans Day,
Veterans Day.
tomorrow.
All right, Randy, that all looks good. I know that you did some additional research as to other communities and what level of participation they have with their veterans as far as the banners go, and it was discovered that most other communities do charge a fee. It ranged from, I think, Amy, you had something, it was
25, I think, was the lowest.
25 up to maybe 100. So there was a wide range of fees. Debbie has submitted some ideas of ways of making this a little easier. So Debbie, why don't you give us your take on your memo?
Thank you, Mayor. With the service organization that it is, it's nonprofit, and I understand that, you know, we'd be running the lift, and I'm just looking at a reduced fee to charge the VFW. If this is, you know, 1 year, and then obviously then the cost would be reduced for the next year. If there's additional leftover monies, I don't know that there would be, but to apply it to our banner installation the next year. You know, none of us know how many years the VFW wants to do this, but so I did, you know, suggest, of course, my first suggestion would be to partner with the VFW and waive the fee. I don't know. I'd like to hear thoughts from council.
So one of the things you mentioned, the other communities, it range from $25 to $100. Is that like a one-time fee, or is that a yearly fee?
It's a yearly fee.
It's a yearly fee?
Right.
Okay.
It's covering up and down. So our estimate was at 120, correct? 120
For year one.
For year one. Now, is the VFW, they're aware of, we're talking about 30 banners, and Randy's making the recommendation that's for 2 years. So they're I guess you're the liaison here tonight, but are they aware that that's not going, I like that idea of the first 2 years being limited to 30, just to get into.
I don't think we discussed that limit last meeting, so, no, this is.
We talked about it just for the first year. We didn't talk about
Right,
year two.
Right, but I mean, we didn't settle on a limit that I recall.
I think it was still a discussion that was taking place, really, hadn't been determined. I think, I'd recommend that we share some cost in it. I think it's a great program. I think it's something that will add to the community as well, so I think at 120 would be a bit steep to have them, I mean, that'd be by the time they'd sell a banner, it's gonna be pushing $200, I would guess. That's, might be a little bit pricey.
So before we do that, we're going to get back to so the VFW understands 30 for year one, but they have not, so we're not sitting here approving a 2-year 30 commitment. So is council okay with just doing the 30 to year one so that we can at least stay on board with VFW? Is that good?
Yeah, I believe that when we talked about it, we said, this is what we would do for year one, and then we would look at it in year two.
I think you're right.
I think that was clear when we were.
I think, right. Randy, you added this 2-year just being cautionary, I think. Is that?
Just to get data. We're not going to have the data for year two. We only have the 1 year, and it just makes more sense to have more data.
When the initial year is gonna be bracket and install and banner install, so it's a more intensive than just the banner install.
And using the lift may not take as much time, so that would give us an idea for the second year, how many hours, and they need to know how much, for the first year, and then how much it would be for the second year, or, so that they can explain that to their families.
Oh, I recognize that.
Yeah, I think one of the things where, we should not be acting on the assumption that this might be the only group that comes and asks us to put banners up. In other communities close by, some of them have high school senior banners up, along with having veteran banners up. So when I was looking at your memo, I was thinking about, okay, what if another group comes to us and says, okay, now we want to put, are you going to also, so I agree that we should reduce the cost. I don't think it should be at no charge. Because, and the other thing to think about is that there might be maintenance that has to be done to the banners while they're up, in between hanging them and taking them down, that we probably wouldn't charge for. We would just do it just to, to make them right.
Yeah, Chris actually said to me, he said, if we got a good windstorm, we're out there re-straightening them all because we're not going to let them look lousy. Yeah.
Right.
And because we're offering them brackets, that reduces their initial cost to get them started as well. Like, they're not going to have as much upfront, right? We can use the same brackets that we have a significant number of them left over. So that's a reduction of getting it off the ground. Mm-hmm. So I would, certainly be in favor of a lower fee, or we, and certainly tracking the hours and finding out how much it actually cost us in time and labor to put them up. I would say that I would be in favor of doing a 50-50 split with them on this.
For year one?
Yes.
And then if the potential could be that could be reduced in 2024, or it may go up based on extenuating circumstances. So I'm also in favor of the 50-50. That would be more in line with what other communities have done, and I think that would give VFW a break.
That's just for that doesn't include the lift? That
I
would
think
be
it
at
should.
our cost?
I would think it would
For
be.
the whole thing?
So $60, are you recommending $60?
Well, if we have to pay for the lift for just this project, we shouldn't have to. So I think it's 50% of the cost of putting the banners up, and that
Okay.
includes. For me, that would be including the lift.
Which would be $60 at our guesstimate.
With the lift and the installation? Okay,
$60 per banner for year one
okay.
is what they would need to add additional to pay the city for the installation and the takedown.
Okay.
Is there any way, my only concern is talking year two. If I'm a family, am I gonna be concerned that year two could come in and be a much higher number? And all of a sudden, I've got a banner. And, you know, it'd be nice to be able to say, what are we saying, this year would be 60? Is that what you said?
30 up, 30 down.
No more, it will not be any more than that for year two or something. Just so these families have an idea that they're not gonna get somehow, you know, second year is gonna be astronomical.
What about year three?
Yeah, I'm talking, yeah.
Well, we'll have some data after 2 years then. Estimate.
Do you know where I'm going?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Suggest the costs are probably gonna increase over time.
Labor increase.
but the labor cost would be less because the brackets are already up.
The amount of time would be less.
And time would, yeah, time would be less.
will be more.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you said it right, Dan.
And the cost of the lift will be more.
And the brackets stay up all year round?
Yeah.
Okay, even the
We're
poles?
gonna try.
Even the poles?
But
They are right now, right, the ones that we were using for, yeah.
So if we remove the 60 and just say 50%,
Yes, I'd be
then
in favor of that.
that would make sense in case things come down, it's 50, less than 50 than what they paid this year, but it might go up depending on, who knows? But,
Just like what we do for
and then, so that's year one, 50/50, 30 banners as the pilot program.
Are you saying we don't give them a fixed cost?
they need a fixed cost for selling.
Yes.
Well, okay,
So that's the $60.
that's the 60. yeah.
Right, yeah, I think we have
Thinking
to
if you
give them a
did,
fixed
but
cost.
to Dave's point, they don't know what it'll be the next year.
Correct.
And that's why I was just trying to convert it to the
understand.
50%, but
The fixed cost, $30 or $60 for the first year and 50% of the actual cost in the years thereafter.
that's good. That clarifies it, at least for now.
You're saying for the
Then they
second
still wouldn't be
year
able to
and
bill the person until after the season was over, as long as they're okay with that.
Yeah, that's kind of,
Because if you're doing actual costs, it has to be after the season's done, right?
Okay.
I think it
would
has to
go
be a
up-
fixed
I'd do the
cost.
first year, it's gonna be 60. Use that as your basis of
If you
time and
say,
all
just
that.
cap that, they'll never be more than 60.
Or just say, you know, this is, I don't like the idea of billing people after the fact. But if we use the first year as this is how many hours it's taken. Close, it's not gonna be that huge off.
I don't think we have to figure out year two right now, tonight. I think we need to get them, I mean, this is a pilot program. They could come back and let's say it goes great and it doesn't take as much time and now they want to do 40 instead of 30. We might come back and say, okay, now you can do 40.
You want to say $60 for the first 2 years and 50% thereafter?
That's what we said.
Now we're in year three.
Right.
I
now you-
I
but now you'll-
definitely don't
let's
think we have
stop
to
at
do
year
years.
two.
You'll have data now
Yeah.
after year two for year three.
Oh my gosh.
We may want to add Center Street.
Okay, we're going down the
Now
whole
we're
rabbit hole.
we can go on hypotheticals all evening.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so what we have on the table right now is $60 for the first 2 years, 50% based on data collected moving forward.
Max of 30 banners.
Max of 30 banners for the first 2 years. And then year three,
Reevaluation.
reevaluate. We'll have more data. That gives us time to look. more
We're saying we're
close.
setting the price for year two?
Yes. $60,
See, I don't think it's going to cost that much.
$40. Let's just get on with it. $60 first year, $40 second year.
A little salt.
We got it.
$60.
We don't know. We're just throwing numbers at the
don't.
wall here.
But it could be $60 maximum for year two, based on what's 50%. It could be less. But
If you feel like
maximum-
we need to put a cap or put a number on year two and 60 is your number,
I'm
Fine.
good with 40. I'm good with 0.
oh my gosh.
Not going to be zero.
Where does the fees
We're
that we
talking
collect?
$3,000 here, man. This is not like the breaking the bank.
It's not that. But it's also about like, you know, we're setting a precedent tonight. We're setting precedent with this. We are.
Say VFW's unique case personally, but
Well, I wouldn't disagree, but I'm just saying we need to think about that.
Where does the fees collected for this go?
They're going to the general fund to help offset the cost of we use the general fund to pay the street guys.
This is very much in line with, once again, other municipalities. I'm in favor of the,
Do you need a motion?
Why don't, just for simplicity's sake, just make it $50. Year 1, year 2, for now, till we get more data.
$50, 25 up and 25 down, is that your,
No, it's the one, it's got to be both, right? I mean, it's 50.
Right, it's both, it's $50.
Because it's got to go up
Who are
and
you
come
right
down.
now?
Right.
Else they'll say leave them up.
And that's comparable in the middle of the different communities we looked at.
All year.
all right, is there a motion for the $50 per year per banner that includes up and down and limits the number of banners to 30 for the first 2 years?
That's what I moved.
I seconded.
All right,
Look at that.
is there
Could we have more discussion?
further discussion?
Okay, I've reserved another 50 minutes. Can we put this, instead of going in the general fund, how about the Chardon Square Improvement Fund? Because that way, that money's there if we need it for the second year to offset or,
I think there's certain procedures on what goes into the Chardon Square Fund that you're talking about,
okay, just asking.
that would have to be adjusted.
And it's not going to be on the square either, I don't think, right?
That's right. It's not.
No,
But I tell you what,
Good try.
I think I think it's a nice selling point. Mark, what is the, in a nutshell, use of that fund?
Unfortunately, in a nutshell, I can't recite that for you. I have to have my information in front of me. But I know right now we generate 2% from, municipal income tax. That's what goes into the fund. That's what I know right now.
A portion of that's being tapped for our 2 million commitment to square renovations for the courthouse, so that's,
still haven't done.
Right. It just seems, it sounds right to me that these fees could be designated for improvement of the looks of the community. So Chardon Improvement Fund, Square Improvement Fund, or designate it to go into lands and buildings for beautification stuff on the square.
well, that can be discussed in budget.
Right.
Yeah.
All
I
good,
think it'd
all
be nice
noted.
to call out, just so the families who are giving that money realizes how that money is actually being used, and I think it's a nice selling point.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? Andy? No? No further discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Gronk?
Yes.
Mr. Lelko?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Lusky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for, working on this stuff. That's great.
Welcome.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 10, new business. Consider the adoption of the 2023-2027 capital improvement plan. And we're going to throw that to Mark.
And he's going to throw it right to me.
Oh.
I'm going to start. Sorry, Mayor. First, I would like to especially thank Mark and Heidi in the back row there for all their hard work pulling this together. There's so much calculating, forecasting, organizing, coordinating that has to be done to pull this together. I'm sure. And it was a heavy lift for them both to make sure it all happened this year and to get it to council. So I appreciate all their hard work. Of course, also all the department heads and Doug and everybody else on staff that contributed to putting the capital plan together. We actually started in July to get this document to you for your consideration. Like I always say, it's a plan and it's subject to changes and revisions. Some revisions are already in the works. Some of the projects that are in here will never come to fruition for whatever reason. Some will be accelerated to get done sooner, and some will be modified for whatever happens as priorities change throughout these years coming. So again, it's a constantly changing. So as you're reading it and understanding it and the public looking at it, more weight should be placed on the first couple of years of the forecast, especially due to the current economic climate that we find ourselves in. There's almost $22.2 million of forecasted infrastructure, machinery, and equipment and land improvements over the 5-year period. Some of the key changes, obviously, the one that was instrumental in making this a very difficult capital improvement plan was the cost of everything going up and the inflationary pressures that we've had. The capital projects, the licensed vehicles, everything went up. Coupled with the fact that we're going to be participating in the county courthouse expansion and addition of the building of $2 million, which we had to put into this capital plan, which was not in last year's, which added to the complexity of what we were doing for this one. The goal of this 2023-2027 plans to maintain, replace the existing structure, our vehicles, machinery, and equipment, while maximizing the usage of grants and loans. But particularly, we're trying not to add a lot of new things that we don't currently have because we couldn't afford them. There were definitely ideas and concepts that we want to put in, but we couldn't squeeze them in because we don't have the money. Mark will go into this more detail in a little bit. Like I mentioned, the construction timeline for projects has been shuffled. Some were moved around in the 5-year period, some were bounced out. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but this one was very challenging. And historically, we've been really fortunate that we've been normally talking about what can we add, what else can we get done, and adding in projects. This one, the first time that I had to experience it was the opposite. What do I have to slash? What do I have to take out? What can't we afford? And it was a different feel for sure, and not a pleasant one. But at the end of the day, we still have, what I say, $22.2 million that we're looking at trying to get done in the next 5 years. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Randy. Members of council, you have before you the capital improvement plan for 2023 through 2027. Over the next 5 years, the city is estimated to spend $22.2 million on infrastructure and facility improvements, equipment, and vehicles. About 80% of this $22.2 million is tied to infrastructure and land improvements, and about 28% is tied to vehicles, machinery, equipment, and building improvements. As Randy mentioned, as in the past, many of these projects are dependent on grant and loan funding. About 38% of these expenses are expected to be paid with grants and loans, and about 56% is tied to grants and loans. Next, I'll go over some key changes to the 23 through 27 plan. And as Randy mentioned, due to increased costs to many projects, such as the State Route Resurfacing Project, estimated at approximately $5 million compared to approximately $3 million in last year's plan, and that's attributed to increased costs and also the city's responsibility for additional work, such as curb ramps, curbs, full depth repairs, etc., and also the addition of the county courthouse project up to $2 million. Some of the projects that were on the previous plan that had to be removed due to lack of funds include the Meadowlands Drive resurfacing project, the traffic signalization update project, South Street water main replacement, North Hampden Street, Huntington Street, Maple Avenue intersection improvements, parking lot projects behind theater and fire station, East Street parking lot. And Randy's going to talk a little bit more about the traffic signalization project.
Yeah, that's one project that, if you'll recall, we did get grant money from NOACA for, which was, I believe, 50-50 of the construction cost, a grant of around $743,000. Our portion still is quite a bit more than the 743 because that's just the construction, not the rest. And I don't have updated numbers for that. The estimate we have was from 21. So I'm working with Kevin Westbrooks to try to get updated actual construction costs and costs for the project right now. But I'd like to see about whatever we can do to bring that project back in to take advantage of that grant. We have a call out to NOACA to see about moving it back and not losing the grant money. But I would like to take any kind of money that is above and beyond what we projected we were going to get for this year, and try to put that in towards this project as our local share, in addition to any money we may get from a sale of property, additional income tax revenue, additional system development charges that would go from water department back to the general fund, those kinds of things to try to make that happen. There's also an opportunity with NOACA. They, as an organization, realize the additional cost everybody's incurring right now, that you can apply for 15% more of the award. So if we were able to do that, and we were successful in doing it, always a big and, that's about another 100,000 on their side, but I'm guessing that 100,000 would be already eaten up by the just additional cost of their portion of the project anyway. So I just want to make sure council is aware that I don't want to turn down money, but if we can't afford to do it, but in the next few years, we'll know more this year about where we wind up at the end of the year. If we do sell property, those monies can then go towards trying to get the local match for this project. And it makes Paul very nervous because it really needs to be replaced. It's over 20 years old. There's not a lot of spare parts laying around for this traffic signalization project anymore. Even to add more complexity to it, the Opticon systems, which is the emergency signal when the police department or the fire department comes through, those also need replaced, and they are not part of this project. So that would be an additional cost, or we do that individually as we just find money and have to, because those are also at the end of their life and not functioning as well as they should be.
So Randy, we're talking about some pretty important safety items. I would suggest that this ought to have a higher priority.
We can look at not doing another project, I'm sure, or several, because this is a lot of money, yeah. And this is later on in the 5-year period, so we won't.
So, I mean, but you said you'd try to reach out to NOACA and see if they would push it into another year out?
Right now, I believe it was scheduled for 26.
Is that the lifespan of that grant? Like, what's the deadline?
That's what I'm trying to find out,
Okay.
is what's the drop dead acceptance date before it would no longer be available to us.
We can ask for the Opticons, those signals.
What about them?
Can't some fire levy money be used for that?
I don't know. I don't know how they were funded before.
Well, I would argue, that, at least
Steve,
50-50 between police, fire.
We'd have to look, Dave.
And again, those are obviously some projects that had to be removed. Some new projects that, are being added are obviously the county courthouse project up to $2 million, 2 police patrol vehicles in 2027, Geocom dispatch mapping software, some parking enforcement systems for the Chardon Square, some dump bodies, some trailer replacements, some traffic count devices. There's a network segregation project for water and sewer, a UV system replacement for water, and then some PC upgrades and other IT-related projects. For this 23 through 27 capital plan, some of the key assumptions in this forecast are that municipal income tax revenues are projected to increase 3% annually. Again, this is a projection used for this forecast, doesn't mean that that'll happen. But based on figures to the end of October, income taxes are up 6.7% from last year. As in the past, the system development charge will continue to be assessed to pay back the general fund for past transfers to cover wastewater treatment plant loan. Redwood, Thistle Creek, and Maple Trace will be the main contributors to that funding. Wage increases are projected based on the income tax formula and the collective bargaining agreements. Based on the income tax projections, wage increases are projected at 3.5% in '23 through '25 and 3% thereafter. Again, that's just a projection based on the income tax formula. Wages also include an additional 2.5% to account for step increases. And while a step increase equates to 5%, approximately 54% of the current full and part-time employees are at the maximum step. The current forecast also has insurance costs projected to increase 5% per year based on historical and industry trends. The actual increase will be, and this came in, shortly after the CIP plan was sent, 2% for medical and an average of 5% for vision, life, and dental, and this will be reflected in the 2023 operating budget. Any questions?
Can somebody, maybe it was when I was off council, I can't recall. I know one of our major projects is 7th Avenue widening and extension. What was the overriding need for the extension?
Why did we apply for it, for NOACA, to do that? Basically, the reason there was to encourage development in the industrial park and down that street. It's just, the section, it's a small section, it's not a big section. And it is a dedicated street already. So when we knew we could go for money from OPWC, we had that as part of the project. And it's been awarded.
I just couldn't recall. When 7th Avenue was built, for that cul-de-sac at the end, it was always planned. Take the ears off the cul-de-sac and push it through on through.
And the rest of it, if you've been on it, it didn't need.
And the ears, that's a technical engineering term, right?
The
Doug?
ears?
That's correct.
We hear you.
Are there any other questions for Randy or Mark? Gentlemen, thank you for your work and everyone involved at the staff level.
I'm sorry. Overall, I'm disappointed in, I think we all are, in the number of projects that we've been talking about around here for years that are getting pushed and pushed and pushed. I think it's very disturbing what's occurring with the state route project, how that number is just, disturbing's not the right word, upsetting. That's a budget breaker. It'd be nice to see the state step up their contribution on projects like that, because I'm sure we're not the only ones. And for a small community to take that kind of jump is astronomical. We're not talking $100,000 here, we're talking millions. And for us, that's huge. And you see the ramifications.
The state did increase their contribution. There's three components. There's the local contribution, the state, and then NOACA. NOACA is not increasing their contributions for the state route resurfacing program, but the state did.
Oh, okay.
So I don't remember exactly what the figure was.
And we still don't know what credit we're going to get from them for what we've done in the past, right?
Yeah, could be a change in percentage, what's the local share.
So if we can get more credit for us taking care of them all these years, that would free up some money that we won't, I don't know when we'll find out, but.
When they do the PCR, right?
But this hasn't been done for 20 years either.
Oh, yeah.
And we have maintained those rules. We've kept them passable. We haven't shirked our responsibility at all.
No, we've had it on the street maintenance program for a couple of years now, and we've documented it. And we get credit for that, so it hopefully will be better than an 80-20 split. We hope for something more favorable, less.
I'm sure we're not the only small little community facing this problem.
We did reach out to ask them about postponing, if it would be beneficial. And the response back has been, everybody predicts it's going to cost even more, it's not going to go down at this point in time, so it really wouldn't be beneficial to wait.
Very good. Once again, any other questions for Randy or Mark? We need a motion, this adoption. So is there a motion to adopt the 2023-2027 capital improvement plan?
I'll move. Second?
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Loco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Very good. Moving on to new business B, consider purchase of ductile iron for 7th Avenue Extension, and this is going to be Paul.
Thank you, Mayor. In your packet, you would have received a memo that I put together outlining the circumstance that we find ourselves in regarding the 7th Avenue project. In talking with vendors, just in our daily purchases, lead times for certain materials are out, specifically ductile iron pipe, which is what we use for our water mains. We were seeing months, now we're seeing almost a year. We were told that if you get your order in today, you can expect it in 10 to 11 months at the earliest. For that reason, staff got together using Doug's takeoff for the material needed for the water line. We are requesting that council allow us to go ahead and send out a request for pricing. We'll do that tomorrow with approval, and we will hope to get competitive quotes, proposals for said material. We estimate that it'll be in excess of $100,000, and we would need council approval, which we would then ask for once we have time to go through the proposals and determine who the successful vendor is next week in our budgetary meetings. So if we don't, we won't have this job awarded until sometime next year, and that would leave us, we just wouldn't have the material in time if the contractor were to be the one purchasing the material. So in that sense, we feel that it's an emergency, and we should move forward. So we're asking for a motion to allow us to move forward with this.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Motion's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Loco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could just make a comment going back a step. Paul, thank you for, or Doug, thank you for that information, and the state has made an adjustment on that, recognizing the difficulties. I did not know that when I made my statement, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate the state at least attempting to help, and in fact, helping to some degree. Tough for everybody.
Yes, it is.
It's good to see that it's being recognized, what we're up against, so I
Yeah.
appreciate that information.
I keep beating a dead horse, but there's an adjacent county where the county puts in an additional 10%, so the community has to come up with 10% of the funds. We don't get that consideration in this county.
What do we put in, what percent are we putting in, Randy?
20.
20,
For the state route? 80/20.
Yeah.
80/20.
Which we hope to improve on based on our maintenance practice.
Right.
Yeah, it's just considering the volume of traffic that moves through this community and what little support we get from our county, it really is disappointing in that regard. They can do it if they wanted to, but they choose not to.
Are there any, is anybody aware of any other funding sources that we could try to tap into for just the state route repaving? Whether it's federal,
Well, I think
anything.
the two primary sources we would hit up would be ODOT and NOACA, and they're both involved, so.
You could go to District 7 and
OPWC.
OPWC, put it in through there, you could end up with a grant and a loan. We typically have not done that, but the project would qualify.
Does anything?
We have quite a few projects with them already,
And it would be loan, it wouldn't be.
and that we're doing on the IFCOM as well.
Interest-free loans are nice. Right?
Yeah, when you get it. Still a loan, but.
And we've done very well with OPWC over the years,
Absolutely.
and it's done quite a lot.
So Randy, are you indicating that that's in play, or we have other projects going on, so it wouldn't be appropriate, or what was your response to looking for additional funding sources?
I know the ones that we're looking at for OPWC funding, they're not large numbers of dollars, but we're looking for like $100,000, $200,000 grant, $200,000 loan. Things that wouldn't make that much difference. If we were to say, we're going to spend everything for, or what we'd get from ODOT for the next 10 years and try to get it all at one time, we could try that, but then we wouldn't be able to do, like, we have 4 different projects that we're planning on getting the OPWC money on. So right now, we have it in here and we have it funded. So it would just be having more money come to that project and not doing all the rest of those other projects that are in here as well. It's not going to bring other projects in, you see what I'm trying to say?
Because remember, way back in the discussions about the bypass, and ODOT came in and said there will not be a Chardon bypass. So those discussions stopped, right? Because years ago, they said, you want to improve your traffic flow, you've got to address your existing streets, make your improvements there. We're not going to build a bypass. Because that was always the rumor that there's possibly it's coming. Well, it's not. So that's what a lot of these projects that you've had to cancel, or we've had to cancel, were to do that, make internal changes to improve our flow.
All right, thanks for the input. Is it okay to move on? Yes, it
Find
is.
someone.
All right, very good.
Yes.
All right, we're going to move on to agenda item number 11, legislation. A, would anyone like this ordinance read in its entirety? Hearing none?
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Cigna Healthcare for the provision of group medical insurance beginning January 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? Call the question?
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Grau?
Yes.
Mr. Lelko?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number, read it, please.
Ordinance number 3220, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Cigna Healthcare for the provision of group medical insurance beginning January 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance number 3220, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Cigna Healthcare for the provision of group medical insurance beginning January 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion for the adoption of ordinance number 3220?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion? Jim, I think you're coming up and joining us.
Sure.
Up there at the podium, thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Roll.
Thank you. I won't take much of your time, but I prepared a brief. Hopefully, you have it in front of you. I just wanted to share a little bit of commentary about sort of the healthcare environment we're in today, because I want to prep you for what we think is coming here in the out years. We ended this year in a pretty good place. We started out with 11 to 12% potential increase. We were able to negotiate that down to about 1.9%, so we're able to stay with Cigna if you approve this measure. But we are seeing significant pressures in the healthcare industry. It started probably 5 or 6 months ago with rebounding COVID claims. Has started to put pressure on the carriers, self-funded plans, so we've started to see costs rise exponentially, where we saw them sort of even out and flatten out over the last 3 or 4 years. We've also seen significant M&A activity at the hospital and provider level. You've seen it here in neighboring Lake County with the purchase of TriHealth by UH. That is causing costs to rise significantly in this geographic area. It's exponentially bad for organizations like yours because you buy typically locally in the local markets and you're not spread out across Northeast Ohio. We expect costs to rise within that sort of Cleveland Clinic UH corridor that we see in Lake County with the Mentor facilities and the facilities in Kirtland. We expect costs will rise somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30% over the next 2 to 3 years. We've seen that consistently when these large entities go and purchase these smaller hospitals. We saw it very significantly in Summit County over the last 2 years. Hasn't affected us this year, nor has it affected us over the last couple of years, but we do expect that it is going to happen here, within the next 18 to 24 months. So I just want you to be aware. We'll continue to manage the costs as we do, but that's created some additional pressure. The other thing that we're seeing is that the loss ratios that the carriers are seeing in that 50 to 150 space, which is where you sit, we've seen a couple of carriers really roll over in terms of their profitability, and that's been passed along to consumers like yours. Hasn't happened yet at Cigna. That's your current provider. We have seen it happen with Anthem and Medical Mutual very recently, where we're seeing 20, 30% increases, in some cases 40 to 50% coming out the door. And candidly, there's not really good evidence that supports that. You're very fortunate. You've had good claims experience, so this was certainly one of the easier ones we've seen in the last 4 to 5 months. But again, if we see those types of increases, we'll continue to manage it accordingly and push the markets as hard as we can to try to find better solutions. This year, obviously, we have an overall 1.9% increase. That's broken down a little bit differently. So in the PPO, you have 2 programs here, a PPO and an HSA. The PPO rates go up by about 2.5%. The HSA rates actually decrease by about 1/3%. And that's primarily because of a statutory change in the deductible for an HSA. So currently you have a $2,800 deductible for single, $5,600 for a family. IRS regulations are pushing that to $3,000, $6,000 for 2023. So we have to make that change in order to keep that high deductible plan federally qualified for an HSA. Other than that, we were able to negotiate an additional $2,500 in wellness funds for the city to spend on flu shots or any other wellness activities that it chooses. And we're recommending that you reappoint Cigna as the medical carrier for 2023. On the ancillary front, that's the Guardian programs. We have dental, vision, life insurance. You're in a group pooling arrangement today with other government entities here in Northeast Ohio. That's been that way for several years, probably more than 5, actually. The pooling arrangement is coming out of a COVID rate guarantee. So during COVID, Guardian was able to push out, like many of the carriers, reductions and 0 increases over that 2-year period of COVID to offset against their required loss ratios that they have to meet. So the initial rate increase that came out this year was 7% for dental and vision, 13.2% increase for the life and AD&D. We were able to negotiate that to a 3% for 2 years, rather than just a 1-year guarantee. We're not successful in negotiating the life rates. your organization is getting older in terms of the life schedules. We have seen some pressure there, but we were able to get a 2-year deal versus a 1-year deal. So we are recommending that you approve Guardian as well. In terms of the summary cost grid, this is just identifying what the total cost is today amongst all of your lines of coverage. Currently, we spend $1,418,295. That will accelerate if you approve this to $1,448,234. When you blend it all out, it's a $29,938 increase over the next 12 months and just a little bit over 2%. Just to give you some relative perspective, average inflation rate across healthcare today is about 7.5. It was 6.5 last year. We're seeing that starting to push upwards of 8, 8.5, 9. So we feel pretty good about where it landed, and we worked with your management team here to come to those recommendations. And I'll take any questions.
I commend you, sir. Good work.
This one was easier than most. This is not the same conversation I'm having with other government entities, unfortunately. So,
Outstanding.
How much is that, if at all, can you attribute to the efforts of staff, all the employees in the city, on the wellness efforts and that type of thing? Is that?
I would say it definitely has some bearing on your cost structures, because I can tell you we would not have been able to do what we did if your claims experience was not good. We manage a number of entities in Northeast Ohio in the government sector, all very close to here, frankly, and this is not the same conversation I'm having with them. They're all in the middle and large double digits. Yes.
Claims experience means the number of claims?
Total volume of claims relative to the total premium that's taken in. So you've got a good loss ratio. We know that for sure. We wouldn't get these kind of numbers if we didn't have that. So I do think those efforts are bearing some fruit.
But in the future, if I understood you correctly, we could be looking at some significant percentage increase.
What I will tell you is the economics of the healthcare purchase for government entities where hospitals change hands is rapidly increasing. It affects you differently than it would, say, a private employer that's having employees come from all over Northeast Ohio to work here. Most of your folks live and work in the area, so they're buying in those local facilities. So what happens with governments when they have local facilities in their region and those hospitals change hands, the pricing schedules accelerate. So you actually lived in a very low-cost environment in Northeast Ohio relative to, say, Cleveland. That is rapidly going to change. So the challenge is when you buy at that facility in greater numbers, your costs are more greatly affected, and that's really just the reality of it. I'd like to give you better information, but that's what we've seen, and we expect it to happen here as well.
I totally concur with Andy's comments. We appreciate the efforts.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Other questions? Call the question, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Lelko?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Moving on to agenda item legislation B. Would anyone like this ordinance read in its entirety? Hearing none?
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Guardian for group dental, vision, and life insurance beginning January 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
Moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Call the question.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Lelko?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number and read it, please.
Ordinance number 3221, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Guardian for group dental, vision, and life insurance beginning January 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance number 3221. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Guardian for group dental, vision, and life insurance beginning January 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion for the adoption of ordinance number 3221?
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion. Mark, or Jim already covered this as well in his presentation, and he's gone anyway, so. He's glad he. Yeah, this is ancillary. Is there any discussion, or we'll just go to the question? Call the question, please.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Loco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means? Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Agenda item 11C, would anyone like this ordinance read in its entirety? Hearing none.
An ordinance establishing a maximum amount payable for medical and dental insurance for employees of the city of Chardon beginning January 1st, 2023.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Call the question.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Loco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number and read it, please.
Ordinance number 3222, an ordinance establishing a maximum amount payable for medical and dental insurance for employees of the city of Chardon beginning January 1st, 2023. Ordinance number 3222, an ordinance establishing a maximum amount payable for medical and dental insurance for employees of the city of Chardon beginning January 1st, 2023.
Is there a motion for the adoption of ordinance number 3222?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. And I understand, Mark, you're going to take us through this?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this just represents the maximum contribution by the city, which is 88% of the annual premium that Jim just discussed.
Are there any other questions for Mark? Thanks, Mark. Call the question.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Loco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 11D, would anyone like this ordinance read in its entirety? Hearing none.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with Blaze Properties Acquisitions LLC for the sale of permanent parcel numbers 10-700800 and 10-709568 and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Call the question.
Mr. Loco? Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes. Motion carries. Number and read it, please.
Ordinance number 3223, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with Blaze Properties Acquisitions LLC for the sale of permanent parcel numbers 10-700800 and 10-709568 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance number 3223, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a purchase and sale agreement with Blaze Properties Acquisitions LLC for the sale of permanent parcel numbers 10-700800 and 10-709568 and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion for the adoption of ordinance number 3223?
So move.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Mrs. Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance authorizing the sale of 223 Center Street. Purchase price is $229,000.
And this is the former, what we refer to as the former maintenance site that we acquired from the county.
Correct. For a buck. Correct.
But just so the public realizes what this is.
Are there any questions for Ben? I know there's a lot more on that, but it sounds like you shared what you considered the...
Those are the pertinent facts.
Okay, understood. Okay. No other questions for Ben? Please call the question.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Lowco?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda 11, item 11E, would anyone like this ordinance read in its entirety? Hearing none.
An ordinance amending section 351.20 of the codified ordinances to eliminate loading zones on Main Street.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
Moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion, call the question?
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Lowco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number and read it, please.
Ordinance number 3224, an ordinance amending section 351.20 of the codified ordinances to eliminate loading zones on Main Street. Ordinance number 3224, an ordinance amending section 351.20 of the codified ordinances to eliminate loading zones on Main Street.
Is there a motion for the adoption of ordinance 3224?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion, Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This piece of legislation is born out of recommendations made to this council by the Service Committee and reported to this council by the Chair of the Service Committee last month. City Manager prepared a memo to that effect as well, so this legislation memorializes the elimination of the loading zone on Main Street.
Yeah, I remember we went through this, and what I got a little confused on here was the distance is 150 feet from main and water. That's correct? And
That language is as it currently exists and remains unchanged. The only change is the elimination of the references to the northwest and southwest corners of the main
okay,
streets.
all right. Okay, very good. Are there any other questions for Ben on this issue?
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris, that, I mean, it says the north side of Water Street, but the 150 feet, I'm just questioning that too, but the loading zone is the one on Main Street, not the one on Water Street. Right?
I think that's correct, but north, it's, as Water Street clearly runs east-west, then it's the portion of Main Street that is north of Water Street. Correct? Okay. Anything else? Call the question, please.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Lowco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Thank you. Legislation 11F. Would anyone like this resolution read in its entirety?
Just a comment that the title that's on the agenda is not matching the title of the resolution.
I just noticed that, so I think it was updated, I believe, Ben?
Yes, correct. Yeah, the resolution you have is the correct title. The one in the agenda is the one that was drafted and then updated. So the resolution in the agenda title is incorrect.
The actual resolution is.
Correct. The actual resolution is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification.
But I don't want it read in its entirety, just to be clear.
Thank you.
Did I ask if anybody wanted it read in its entirety yet? or-
I think you started to ask
Did I?
that when I
All
kind
right,
of
so
chimed in.
no
on
one
that.
wants to read it in entirety, so hearing none.
A resolution authorizing the settlement of a claim resulting in approximately 118,000 gallons of city water lost on August 24th, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Call the question.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Graw?
Yes.
Mr. Lowco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number and read it, please. Yes, number and read it, please.
Resolution number 18-22, a resolution authorizing the settlement of a claim resulting in approximately 118,000 gallons of city water lost on August 24th, 2022, and declaring an emergency. Resolution number 18-22, A resolution authorizing the settlement of a claim resulting in approximately 118,000 gallons of city water lost on August 24th, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion for the adoption of resolution number 1822?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion.
Question.
Ben?
I don't know if it's for Ben or for the service director. Under the terms of the settlement, are we allowed to discuss the circumstances of the water loss?
Sure, there's no prohibitions in the term of settlement agreement that would stop you from doing that.
Paul, what happened?
There was a contractor working at the Maple Leaf Plaza putting in cable lines. They were working outside of the dollar store at the north end. They were not supposed to be there. We had the water line marked out, but it is private. And nonetheless, they bored right through it, drained the tower considerably in a matter of about 25 minutes. So we immediately went up there. We were notified. Giant Eagle was out of water for the majority of the day, as was the plaza. They got a contractor up there to fix it, another contractor, and that was our estimate on what our water loss was. There's other dollars to be paid by the contractor's insurance company for pavement restoration and so on and so forth, but that's our portion, to the best of our estimate.
And that factual recitation, just so council and everyone's aware, it's all alleged. Nothing, no liability or fault was adjudicated by anyone, and any cause of any damages is denied by all parties. But rather than fight about it, these alleged facts are what's been set out.
So they were directional drilling? Is that?
They were.
Allegedly directionally drilling.
They had a directional drill there. It was assumed that that's what they were doing.
And where did the water, so draining the tower, this is a huge volume of water. Where'd that go? I don't recall seeing that, but.
So part of the incident, as it's explained to us, is that it went into the storm sewer and made its way to Bridgewater. And there was another contractor working in the pond at Bridgewater. And they got flooded out and barely escaped. They had the pond drained as they were mucking out the pond at Bridgewater.
And it was a beautiful sunshiny day.
Yes.
So they were not expecting any water, so.
Yeah, so they had a deluge come down to them.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Thank you.
All this legal speak.
So I assume the fire department was notified? I mean, that would have eliminated fire coverage in that whole quadrant of town.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's the alleged story.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
That's right.
Real money,
Correct.
not alleged money.
Correct.
That's good. All right, anything else for Ben and/or Paul? If not, call the question.
Mrs. Chuha? Mr. Grau?
Yes.
Mr. Loco?
Yes?
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Thank you. Legislation 11G, would anyone like this resolution read in its entirety? Hearing none?
A resolution authorizing the settlement of a moral claim involving property damage and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
So move.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Call the question.
Mr. Grau?
Yes.
Mr. Loco?
Yes?
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number and read it, please.
Resolution number 19-22, a resolution authorizing the settlement of a moral claim involving property damage and declaring an emergency. Resolution number 19-22, a resolution authorizing the settlement of a moral claim involving property damage and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion for the adoption of resolution number 1922?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Back to Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the city has before it, this council has before it, the resolution authorizing a settlement of a moral claim. There was some property damage to a vehicle owned by Mr. Dave and Miss Vicky Taylor. Total damage to their tires as a result of road improvement project is $1,247.87. And although the liability is questionable, as a moral claim, council has before a resolution that would authorize us to reimburse the Taylors for that.
And it says that Roniak Paving is agreeing to pay for paying for the cost of tires and tow in the amount of $623.94.
That is a separate issue to be discussed as part of a separate resolution with Roniak. That's it.
Are there any other questions for Ben on this issue? If not, call the question.
Mr. Lowco?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes. Thank you. Legislation 11H, would anyone like this resolution read in its entirety? Hearing none?
A resolution transferring funds in the City of Chardon Treasury for 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to read this by title only for the second and third time?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Call the question.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley?
Yes.
Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Lowco? Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Motion carries. Number and read it, please. A resolution carries. Number and read it, please.
Resolution number 20-22, a resolution transferring funds in the City of Chardon Treasury for 2022 and declaring an emergency. Resolution number 20-22, a resolution transferring funds in the City of Chardon Treasury for 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion for the adoption of resolution number 2022?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of council, you have before you a resolution to transfer funds. The transfers are needed to maintain positive balances in all the city's funds and are included in the 2022 budget.
Are there any questions for Mark? Hearing none, call the question, please.
Mr. Molesky?
Yes.
Mr. Blackley? Mrs. Chuha?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Lowco? Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Means?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item number 12, review of expenditures. Dan?
We allegedly, no, we actually.
You will certainly.
The expenditures. There was some questions. Mark has responded to everything, and there was a few things they corrected, and everything's in order.
A question for Paul arising out of going through those expense sheets. I noticed that we were having some painting done of the mast arms, signal mast arms in the city, and I guess you're having some trouble finding somebody to get those to get painted. Are we going to keep doing that? I mean, I drive past every day the mast arm bases there at the entrance to Chardon Plaza and AutoZone are in pretty bad shape.
Yeah. It's been the last couple of years we've been able to get some done. I think it was the same company that did it 2 years in a row. So
I think the same company's doing them next year too.
Yeah.
So you just,
Yeah, it's in the pre-budget meeting for next week. You're stealing his thunder. That's part of it.
you shortened the meeting by 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, to your point, we need to continually put some funds to get them all looking better.
that's all.
Anything else for Dan on that, or Andy? No?
Can paint you a picture.
No, I just want to comment that the finance director and staff respond very, very quickly to Dan's lengthy list of questions.
Indecisively as well.
And decisively, yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep.
All right, thank you. Agenda item number 13, executive session. We don't have one, folks.
Oh, yeehaw.
Ow.
How about that?
Allegedly.
Well, we discussed it last week, and then as, you know, every day goes by,
Holding our breath.
who knows, but we kept our fingers crossed, and everything went well. So no executive session. Any other business to come before council? We mentioned Veterans Day tomorrow, so 11 a.m. up on the square. We certainly want to wish Chardon football best of luck tomorrow night as they take on Kenston down in south of Youngstown. And it's going to be a tough game.
Yes, it will.
So we wish them all the best of luck. Unfortunately, I think bad weather's moving in, so we'll see what kind of impact that has, but I'm not too worried about our running game. And so we should be in good shape. I also want to mention that Chardon volleyball, girls volleyball, had a great season. Made huge rounds into
Boys
playoffs.
and girls cross-country did well.
Cross country was getting it done too. It's been a long time. So the boys cross country team made it as a team to the state, and that's been forever ago that the whole team made it there. There's been individuals, but as a team. So congratulations to them. I got an invitation. I don't know if Steve knows this or Planning Commission, but the Jog of Faith Rescue Mission is having a ribbon cutting ceremony here coming up on, where does it say here? November 13th at 2 to 4 p.m.
Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah.
November 13th. That's this Sunday, yeah, you're right. So just if anybody needs any more information, I have a flyer here for them, but we've been seeing progress on that for how many years now? At least 3, I think. Andy, when it came to planning, that might have been 4 years ago, but somewhere on there. So that's all I had for additional other business. Does anyone else have anything else? Randy?
I just have one item, wanted to confirm with council that everyone received the request from Lee Kemp we were talking about the different high school athletics. He is requesting that council consider erecting signs for the individual state champions somewhere in the city. And I think council should have received that. Not looking for any decisions tonight, but something we should probably talk about the next meeting.
Mayor, I'd like to remind everybody that November 26th is Small Business Saturday, and there are a lot of things going to be going on, especially around town for that. So folks should be, you can look on certainly on the Chardon Square Association and other groups like that. They're going to be doing a lot of things on the square. There's going to be free gift wrapping. There's going to be lots of stuff going on. So please come out and support your local businesses.
I noticed that there's some Christmas decorations starting to move onto the square, so elements, building blocks and so on. Moving in that
There'll be
direction.
more going up Sunday.
Yeah.
We also got an invitation to the turkey trot.
Turkey trot, and that would be on Thanksgiving afternoon, morning?
It's at 8:30.
8:30.
Contact Becky.
And you can register online, and there's information on the city's website about that and the link to being able to register.
All right, does anyone else have any other business to come before council?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Likewise opposed. We are adjourned, ladies and gentlemen, at the hour of 8:28. Nice move. Thank you, everyone.